Hello and welcome to WION Live broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Simon Marks, and let's start with the top stories of the hour. India's ambassador to the UAE tells WION that 2 Indian nationals are among the 3 people killed in an attack near Abu Dhabi airport. UAE state media reports that the drone attack, which has been claimed by Houthi rebels, left 6 people injured. One day after the FBI named a British national the suspect in the Texas synagogue hostage incident, the UK's counter-terrorism police detain 2 teenagers in connection with the investigation. A major winter storm slams the southeastern United States with heavy snow and ice knocking out power for almost 250,000 people. Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, says that water is the immediate need for the residents of Tonga. She hopes aid will be rushed to the island after flights were unable to reach Tonga on Sunday due to that ash cloud caused by an underwater volcano. Amid a surge in daily new COVID-19 cases, China says no tickets for the Beijing Winter Olympics will be sold to the public. The country reported over 220 new COVID cases in the last 24 hours. That's the highest since March of 2020. And the world number 1, Ashley Barty, joins defending champion Naomi Osaka in the second round of the Australian Open. 2020 champion Sophia Kenin suffers a first-round exit at the hands of fellow American Madison Keys.
Oh, there's a lot of people that have pressed the reset button at the end of the year, and it's a great time
We begin today with the latest. The man who held 4 people hostage at... We begin with the latest on the Texas synagogue attack. The man who held 4 people hostage at a synagogue just outside Dallas has been identified by the FBI as Malik Faisal Akram, a 44-year-old British national of Pakistani origin. He was shot and killed at the end of the tense 11-hour standoff in Colleyville, Texas, where Akram launched his attack in the middle of Saturday morning services at Congregation Beth Israel. An FBI hostage rescue team stormed the synagogue and freed the remaining 3 hostages. One other worshipper was freed earlier. Akram died as the SWAT team entered the temple. The FBI's field office said that there was no indication that anyone else was involved in the attack, but Britain's counter-terrorism police have now detained 2 teenagers in South Manchester in connection with the ongoing investigation. Greater Manchester Police said in a statement that they were being questioned in connection with the incident. Akram was demanding the release of a Pakistani neuroscientist called Afia Siddiqui. She was the first woman to be suspected by the United States for her links with Al-Qaeda and was detained in Afghanistan in 2008. 2 years later, she was sentenced by a court in New York to 86 years in prison for the attempted murder of US military officers in Afghanistan. She's currently being held at a prison in Fort Worth in Texas, which is only about 30 kilometers away from the synagogue that Akram attacked. Siddiqui's links to Akram, if any, are unclear. Police have not clarified whether the assault team killed him or whether he killed himself. The FBI's special agent in charge said that an investigation is underway. The incident led to renewed calls to fight anti-Semitism in the United States. US President Joe Biden calling the hostage standoff an act of terror. He appeared to confirm that the attacker had sought the release of the convicted terrorist, Afia Siddiqui, and President Biden pledged that America will not tolerate extremist attacks.
This was an act of terror. This was an act of terror, and it not only was related to someone who had been arrested, I might add, 15 years ago and been in jail for 10 years. The idea is there was something new. And they did just a great job. I also told him that I wanted to make sure we got the word out to synagogues and places of worship that we're not going to tolerate this, that we have this capacity to deal with assault on particularly the anti-Semitism that has grown up.
On the other side of the Atlantic, Britain's Foreign Secretary Liz Truss likewise condemned the hostage-taking as an act of terrorism and anti-Semitism. She wrote on Twitter that the UK stands with the US in defending the rights and freedoms of citizens against those who spread hate. Residents of Colleyville in Texas are still struggling to comprehend the incident.
You don't want to see anything like that happen, whether it's in a Jewish synagogue or whether it's in a church or just in any situation. It's sad that I guess they had to end up taking the guy out, but it's good that no one else was hurt.
The other big story of the day here in the US, that major winter storm that has ripped through the southeast of the country, the mid-Atlantic region and parts of Canada. It's brought freezing rain and snow. More than 80 million people are currently under a weather warning. Nearly 3 million people up here in the northeast region are facing warnings of high winds in New York City, Boston and here in Washington, D.C. Over 235,000 people are currently without power in some states. Virginia, Georgia, North and South Carolina have all declared states of emergency. Nearly 3,000 US flights were cancelled over the last 24 hours. Highway patrols have reported a number of road accidents. Meanwhile, in the Sunshine State of Florida, a tornado slammed a trailer park on Sunday as the winter storm swept much of the US southeast. Officials said 27 mobile homes were destroyed and 24 were badly damaged. There were, however, no reports of serious injuries. This is the latest extreme weather event that has hit the US in recent weeks. Earlier this month, a major storm left some parts of Virginia and New York under 6 to 8 inches of snow. Just days after its first eruption triggered massive tsunami waves across the Pacific, another large eruption has been detected at the Tonga undersea volcano. These are the latest satellite images. They show an eruption at the volcano off the coast of the South Pacific island. Just a day earlier, a massive eruption triggered a tsunami and blanketed the island with volcanic ash. The latest images show a large fresh plume rising into the sky. America's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration reports that eruption propelled ash 20 kilometers up into the air. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center says that it also detected large waves in the area. The first eruption that triggered that major tsunami alert across the Pacific caused significant damage to Tonga's capital. The full extent remains unclear. Communications are still hampered even after 3 days. Floodwaters inundated the region and severed telephone links and power grids. And according to officials, it may take weeks to restore the island's internet service completely. Saturday's volcanic eruption is believed to be the biggest since Pinatubo erupted in the Philippines in 1991. The Tonga eruption was so powerful it was recorded around the world and felt as far away as Alaska. It triggered giant waves along the Pacific coastline from Japan to the United States. The northeastern prefecture of Iwate in Japan saw waves as high as 2 meters. Major traffic jams blocked the roads of southern Japan on Sunday after the authorities imposed a tsunami advisory. Hundreds of Japanese citizens were advised to evacuate as waves of more than a meter slammed coastal areas. In Australia, meanwhile, the country has sent a surveillance flight to Tonga to assess the extent of the damage, and New Zealand's military has also sent a special flight to review the damage. A towering ash cloud earlier had prevented the military from launching any flights to Tonga following the eruption.
We will be working closely with the Government of Tonga, with Her Royal Highness, the High Commissioner of Tonga in Canberra, to ensure that we are able to deliver the sort of support that we provide to our Pacific family and our Pacific friends. This is a very challenging time. Communications are deeply, deeply affected by the events of the volcanic eruption. It has been felt in other parts of the region. We know ourselves.
Now, in its fourth missile test this year, North Korea has fired 2 suspected short-range ballistic missiles. South Korea's military reports that the missiles were fired from an airport in Pyongyang. Japan's government also reported the launch, the country's chief cabinet secretary condemning the launches as a threat to the region's peace and security.
누구도 범접 못하는 세계적인 군사 강국으로 더욱은 경의하는 최고 사령관 동지.
これまでの弾道ミサイル等の度重なる発射も含め、一連の北朝鮮の行動は我が国と地域及び国際社会の平和と安全を脅かすものであり、強く非難します。国民の生命、財産を守り抜くため、引き続き情報の収集、分析及び警戒監視に全力を挙げ、今後追加して公表すべき情報を入手した場合には、速やかに発表することとしたいと考えております。
In the last 2 weeks, nuclear-armed North Korea has conducted 3 other missile tests. That's an unusual frequency of launches. 2 of those involved hypersonic missiles, which are capable of high speeds and maneuvering after launch. The last test involved a pair of short-range ballistic missiles fired from train cars. The latest launch appears to involve 2 short-range ballistic missiles fired east from Sunan Airfield in Pyongyang, the North Korean capital. All the launches have drawn international condemnation and an appeal for dialogue. The Biden administration has imposed new sanctions and threatened more. North Korea defended the missile tests as part of its sovereign right to self-defense. It instead accused the United States of intentionally escalating the situation by imposing new sanctions. Pyongyang called that move a provocation. The Biden administration called on the UN Security Council to blacklist several North Korean individuals and entities. It also repeated calls for Pyongyang to return to talks aimed at reducing tensions. But Pyongyang instead has doubled down on its drive to modernize the country's military, and it is refusing to respond to those US appeals for talks. Our correspondent Phoebe Amoroso has sent us this report from Tokyo.
Details are still emerging, but the launches were confirmed by both South Korean and Japanese authorities. And as you mentioned, these are short-range ballistic missiles. They're believed to have flown less than 400 kilometers, reaching an altitude of around 50 kilometers. And these were launched from an airport in Pyongyang, North Korea's capital. And that was last used for a launch for an intermediate ballistic missile back in 2017. And this contrasts from the launches that we saw by North Korea last week on Friday. These were railway-borne missiles. We're seeing a variety of different tests being conducted. Now, South Korea and Japan are still analysing the situation. They're collecting data in order to determine further details. But of course, both countries have strongly condemned the latest launch. But analysts really looking on say that the variety of missiles and the variety of different sites that these have been launched from are sending a message that North Korea has missiles to expend and really trying to consolidate and also bolster its military credibility. So that's the kind of sign that observers believe North Korea is trying to send with these repeated launches.
After months of simmering tensions, Ukraine is now accusing Russia of waging a hybrid war, saying that it has evidence that Russia is responsible for a massive cyber attack that knocked out key government websites over the past week. Ukraine alleges that the purpose of the attack was to destabilize the situation in the country, halting the work of the public sector and crushing Ukrainians' trust in the country's authorities. The Kremlin has denied Russia was behind any attack. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told CNN that Ukraine is blaming everything on Russia these days, including even bad weather. A total of 70 government websites were targeted in the early hours of Friday. While initially the fallout seemed to be minimal, Microsoft warned that the malware attack could prove destructive to more organizations than initially feared. It warned critical government digital infrastructure could be rendered inoperable. The United States, meanwhile, says that it plans to lay out its next steps towards easing tensions with Russia, amid mounting fears that Russia is planning an invasion of Ukraine. But US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said that the US is ready for any eventuality. Washington is concerned by Russia's military buildup of nearly 100,000 troops along Ukraine's border, prompting fears that Moscow is readying for a possible offensive against Ukraine. Despite intense rounds of diplomacy last week between Russia, the United States and NATO, there was no breakthrough to de-escalate that situation along the Russia-Ukraine border. At the end of a long week of discussions, Russia said it was deeply disappointed by the outcome of the dialogue. NATO has turned down one of Russia's central demands, that the alliance stop expanding its reach eastwards towards Russia. Russia is demanding that NATO return to the position that existed in 1997, the year the Russia-NATO Founding Act was signed. Russia says the strengthening of NATO's military near its borders poses a national security threat to the alliance. NATO's Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said on Sunday that the bloc will never pull Allied troops from member states that had joined in the years since 1997. But the alliance, he said, is ready to discuss arms reduction with Russia. Russia's other demands include mutual security guarantees in Europe and the non-deployment of short and intermediate-range missiles within reach of its territory. Meanwhile, ballistic missile launchers are said to have been spotted moving west through Russia. This as the Kremlin said that the standoff over Ukraine was at an extremely dangerous phase. Videos appeared on social media showing Iskander-M launchers being taken from a train in Russia's Far East. However, according to a Russian group that monitors military deployments, the final destination of the launchers and the purpose of their transportation were not clear. These alarming developments come even as Moscow continues to deny having any military expansion plans towards Ukraine. Israel's former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is reportedly negotiating a deal to end his corruption trial. If it goes through, the deal could include a provision banning him from further activity in politics. Netanyahu was Israel's longest-serving prime minister, serving a record 12 years in power from 2009 until just last year. He became Israel's first sitting prime minister to be indicted on corruption charges. In 3 separate indictments, he faces charges of bribery, fraud and breach of trust. Netanyahu has been accused of accepting improper gifts. He's also accused of illegally trading regulatory favours with media moguls in exchange for positive news coverage. Netanyahu lost power last year and is now the country's leader of the opposition. He has pleaded not guilty to all 3 charges. Reports say the 72-year-old is in discussions with Israel's Attorney General and may plead guilty to reduced charges. Potential prison time would be commuted to community service, but a number of elements remain unresolved, including a charge of moral turpitude. The talks have reportedly hit a bump in the road over Netanyahu's demand to be spared conviction of that charge, which under Israeli law would see him banned from politics for 7 years. If he accepts the charge of moral turpitude, the settlement could see the 5-time premier sentenced to community service. The reports have rocked the Likud party that Netanyahu dominated for nearly 2 decades. If the deal goes through, it could pave the way for new leadership of Likud. Last year, allied parties refused to join Netanyahu, citing the ongoing trial. Likud failed to form a new government. If he were barred from politics, right-wing members of Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's coalition could opt to form a new government with a Likud party under new leadership. The country's health minister expressed his displeasure over Netanyahu's plea deal. In a tweet, he said, "There is no person who endangered the rule of Israeli law more than Netanyahu," adding that Netanyahu is not entitled to deals and facilitations. In the face of the great corruptors, the law must be exhausted, he said. WION's correspondent Jody Cohen has sent us this update from Israel.
Netanyahu's lawyers and Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit are said to be inching closer towards a possible plea deal. However, the prospects of a deal are said to be low, as this could bar Netanyahu from public office for 7 years, likely ending his political career. Opinion polls suggest that most Israelis oppose a plea deal. Left-wing supporters believe it would send the wrong message and that the former PM should go to prison. Right-wing supporters oppose it as they believe he is innocent and that the court will throw out its cases. They point to the fact that the reported plea would dismiss the strongest charge against Bibi, that of bribery, as proof that the prosecution's case is weak. This is Jodie Cohn for WION World is One.
Now, Turkey is famous for many things, including its annual camel racing festival. It attracts thousands of people from all over the world every year. But now the festival is facing criticism. Animal rights activists take the view that the camels are abused and injured during the event.
The 40th International Camel Running Festival was held on the 16th of January in the western Turkish town of Selçuk. A total of 152 camels dressed in ornamental clothing and embroidery of various patterns and colours on their humps and necks participated in this festival. The event is expected to run till the end of March, where only one camel is chosen as the winner in a victorious celebration. Visuals on your screen show camels being brought into a sandy arena, with referees and other personnel assisting them. These camels are further made to wear muzzles in order to prevent bite wounds.
It is impossible for the camels to bite and harm each other. Furthermore, there are 22 people in the wrestling area, 11 for each camel, who are called rope holders and tasked with separating the camels. These people pull the camels away from each other immediately when the referee feels a negativity. There is certainly nothing such as breaking each other's feet or biting each other.
The festival, which is famous all over the country, attracts scores of tourists. Thousands of people set up tables and chairs while they watch these animals fight. However, the animal rights activists have now sounded an alarm. They are slamming the Turkish camel wrestling festival for all the right reasons.
Animal fight is a big crime. How can this happen? You see an animal, a live being, fight in front of you and it is suffering, is wounded, and maybe they kill each other. People enjoy this and maybe make a financial profit.
But Turks say that the wrestling between animals is done with an emotion of love, keeping in mind all adequate measures that are taken to avoid any kind of mishap.
It is something that is done with love. It's not a fight. It is wrestling, just like how humans wrestle. Their mouths are muzzled. They cannot bite each other. All kinds of measures are taken, and this culture emerged many years ago.
But the question which arises is, a tradition which is 2,400 years old and is connected to the Turks, can that be banned in the near future or not? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And that's all for the Monday edition of WION Live broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Simon Marks. I'll be back with the Tuesday edition. Same time, same place tomorrow. Stay with WION. World is One.
There are many other...